Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here, and I'm back with a new video because NAXX is officially out. So we have some data that's come in. I've played a handful of runs myself as well, and I think I have a pretty good idea of where the classes are ending up, so I thought we might as well do this tier list video to rank all the classes against each other. And so we'll get right into that in a second, but before I do, I think there are a couple other important updates that I figure would be worth mentioning. The first one is that the leaderboard is officially out on the website, so you can actually see this. I will still probably make a future video about this because there are some things. Essentially, the way that they are calculating this, it is pretty much just a running average of your average wins over the entire expansion. There's a decay calculation. It's not exactly that, but effectively it is. So it comes with a lot of the downsides that, you know, you can just start on new accounts and get an advantage and stuff. But also you can, if you wanted to, retire a whole bunch of runs to just get 30 runs in, and that's what a whole bunch of people did here. You can see there's a whole bunch of them here. What's interesting is it looks like this guy, I actually checked my match history. I actually have a game against this guy. This guy I think probably actually legitimately played 30 runs already. Everyone else obviously did a handful and then just retired a bunch, most likely. But in any case, if you have the appetite to do such, you can get 30 runs in, and once you have 30 runs, you will show up on here. But the other thing I thought would be very important to mention, because it is impacting the tier list currently, is that there are currently a whole bunch of cards from the mini set that are undraftable. I don't know exactly how many there are here, but this is like 12 or so, and there's only like 38 cards in the mini set, so that's like a third of the entire batch of new cards is just not in the game, including, by the way, all of the Death Knight cards. So the location, the colossal, these are all undraftable. You can still discover them, but otherwise there's just a whole bunch of these, like the Druid card draw one. Very relevant that that one's not in. And the other really important one to mention as well is the neutral one. Darkfall and Shadow, that's the 3 mana 3/3 rush that gains Reborn on Mana Thirst 6. So that's a very important one to know, that it is not currently in the game, but expect a hotfix sometime in the next week or two, which should probably add these in. Or maybe it'll be a month, who knows, you never exactly know with this stuff. But in any case, let's get back into the tier list here. So one last thing to mention before this is we should talk a little bit about the meta. So basically the meta, as we would have predicted, is unbelievably high power level, basically unlike anything we've ever seen before. Some other stand metas were also very strong, but still this vastly exceeds anything that's ever happened. There are a whole bunch of the class that we will be soon putting on the top tier of this list that just generate infinite cards. A lot of classes have the potential to generate infinite cards as well. You can always get Sunwell and stuff. There's a lot of discover, just absolutely insane things going on. And I may make a guide video that talks a little bit more about how to do this, but the shortest thing I can say is that you should know whether or not you're one of the haves or have-nots, and especially if you're a have-not deck, you just need to go face with everything pretty much as soon as you have the opportunity to, and just hope it works out for you, because you're just not going to beat infinite value. You shouldn't be trading much because there really aren't that many punishes for not trading, and you just want to get damage in when you can to have any shot against a lot of your opponents in this meta, including a lot of the first class we alluded to earlier, which is Mage. Mage simply has the most random generation, the most really powerful cards. You know, Rune of the Archmage, just everything, you know, they have a whole ton of spells, just they are very, very powerful. The one weakness they have is that, again, they just don't have too much life gain, right? They do have, like, Cold Case, the skeleton 4-mana spell that does give armor. They can generate, like, ice berries and stuff, too. It is possible, but, you know, the best chance you're going to have against a lot of mages is pressuring them and just hoping that they don't have the answer. Oh, and one thing I should mention as well, and this is part of the reason Mage is so strong right now, is a lot of the historical adjustments, it does appear, have just been completely turned off. They kind of just turned all the previous adjustments off and just said, okay, let's just see where things end up, basically. So as a result of that, you have things like Drakefire Amulet, for example, in Mage, which was adjusted to essentially legendary rarity, but now you can see very clearly in the stats, Amulet is one of the most common cards in the entire class. That adjustment is completely off. So there are other cards as well that were previously nerfed that are just not nerfed anymore. So that's contributing to why Mage is such a standout on the top right now. Well, now we move on to tier 2 on the tier list. Mage is by far, in a way, the best class right now, but the one class we're putting in the A tier here is the class that potentially is the best counter to Mage, which it often is, and that is Hunter. So Hunter, it has a lot of tools as well. Really, almost all the classes on this list do have a lot of tools, but Hunter has a whole bunch of combos and things you can pull off to do a lot of unfair things that can even possibly deal with a mage until they play Rune of the Archmage and then undo all of it anyway. But, you know, a lot of times you'll be able to just do insane things that'll, if not beat mages, still beat everyone else. And also, you have critically the hunter hero power, so you just have the ability against the mages to often just kill them outright. So it's not a huge separation from the other class, but I think just for the meta, this was enough of a reason to put hunter on its own tier here. I did have a really cool hunter deck which had just a lot of discover from my own deck actually with the 2 mana 1/3, and there were a lot of cool things, a lot of cool games. That one might go on YouTube. It'll be the most likely one out of all the ones I've done so far, but I'm not sure if that will. I haven't edited it yet. Don't expect it anytime soon, but that might be there. It's available in the Twitch VOD, by the way, twitch.tv/kolst/videos if you want to check it out. But with that, just below Hunter, there is, again, isn't too big of a difference here, but the first class we'll put here is Paladin. Paladin just has an overwhelming card quality. Their cards just do insane things. They have so many late game cards. However, the issue is that they just simply aren't as good at that as Mage is. Mage just has more unfair things they can do. So that's why Paladin is down here. Even though their cards, card for card, it's insanely powerful, they just don't have the same potential for BS essentially that Mage does, so that's why they're down here, but they are undoubtedly very, very strong. Oh, and another thing I should mention with Paladin here is that Paladin actually, I did mention that a lot of the previous adjustments were turned off. Paladin specifically in the Dragon Discover category did not have their nerfs turned off, so that's part of the reason actually that Paladin isn't any higher than it is. If they had a lot more access to especially Flay of the Bronze, they'd be a lot higher on this list than they are right now. And with that, we move on to the other class in this tier, which is Druid. So Druid unfortunately suffering that they don't have the 1 mana draw 3 from the new expansion. That was one of the most critical cards missing. But Druid again just has a lot of really good cards. A lot of really good cards came back in Standard, for example. Scale of Onyxia, Miracle Growth, a whole bunch of good tempo cards, some Discovers as well. They still have all the token package that they had from last meta. So overall, Druid is just a very, very flexible class. There's a lot of things you can do. And ultimately, one of the better classes at being able to play mid-range to aggressive against mages. You just, again, have kind of a weakness if they have all the clears, but you just kind of have to hope they don't have it. And with that, that is actually going to be it for the third tier here. Now there are going to be a lot of classes in this next tier here. There isn't a huge gap between Paladin, Druid, and the rest of the field. There's still just a lot of powerful things you can do, but these classes are just a bit worse or less consistent than the classes above them here. First one we're going to be talking about here is Priest. Priest can do a lot of Priest things. They do have the location back. There's just a lot of things they can do. They have so many combos like they always do. You know, Priest can always do Priest things. Makes them a pretty high skill class. But they're just simply not as consistent, I don't think, as some of the other classes. But a skilled player can definitely get Priest to do some very good things. But again, you're simply going to struggle against mages because they're probably just going to do more unfair things than your class is even capable of. And with that, we'll move on to the next class here, which is Shaman. Shaman again is in the category where they have a lot of good cards, kind of like Paladin, but to be completely honest, their cards just aren't quite as good as Paladin. They don't have quite as much generation and value, although they do have very good tempo. But the one thing Shaman doesn't actually have is they don't really have a great way to blow up the entire board, so that can be one weakness. But overall, Shaman again is a pretty good class. None of these classes are bad, it's just, you know, there's a huge separation between them and Mage. But Shaman's also a pretty reasonable class to play right now. And so with that, we'll move on to the next class we're going to be putting here, which is actually Death Knight. So Death Knight, I probably could have teased this earlier in the video, is no longer the king of Arena. They're definitely a very far distance from Mage, but they're not completely unplayable. The thing with Death Knight, you know, they still have a lot of really solid cards, but the cards are not nearly as overwhelmingly powerful due to just a lot of the other things that are around, which makes Death Knight actually, even though their cards are consistent, a relatively inconsistent class right now, because simply a lot of the times you're going to need to discover a Marrowgar or just, you know, any of the other 11 broken things Death Knight can potentially do, or else you're just going to lose to most of your opponents now, unless they just fall over in tempo. And again, they're the class definitely the most of all suffering from these undraftable cards right here. You know, Syndragosa being a very good Colossal and Construct Quarter being what should be probably one of the best cards in the game period right now, at least for non-legendaries. So If those bugs get fixed, I would definitely expect Death Knight might move up a tier or so, but you know, by the time there might also be balance changes. I'd expect Mage gets nerfed at that point, so we'll see, but be on the lookout for Death Knight to retake its spot up or around the top at some point. And so with that, we move on to the next class on this tier list. Next one we're putting here is Rogue. So Rogue does have a lot of random generation, can specifically randomly generate from other classes, and that's very important for them because Rogue cards, they're solid, but they just simply aren't at the power level of a lot of other things right now. So again, Rogue is one of these kind of inconsistent classes where if you do generate the right kind of cards, you can totally take a mage for its money and try to contest it. But that's the thing, is that you're just not going to random into the Rune of the Archmage or whatever very often that you might need to do that. So most of the time you're going to struggle, but you're going to do well against a lot of other classes being able to do that. It's just not going to beat a mage very often. So overall, Rogue goes into this territory where they're just, again, kind of inconsistent in their results, but they can do potentially very strong thing. Overall, it puts them around the level of a lot of the not so great classes, but again, the variance can be high. With that, we'll move on to the next class in this tier list, which is Warrior. Warrior at the same tier again. Warrior is much more consistent than Rogue. They don't have nearly as much access to Discover, but you know, they still have all their weapons. They have a lot of ways to generate stats, a bunch of taunts. They can win a lot of long games against the other classes. As a result of that, they can also try to go for tempo, try to do aggressive things against Mage. So a very flexible class again, but you're just still fighting an uphill battle, generally speaking, against classes that just can do way more powerful things than you can. So overall, that makes Warrior pretty solid, still playable. None of these classes are bad. It might look a little deceiving being this low on the tier list, but none of these classes are bad. They're all playable. They're just not Mage, essentially. And one more class which is not Mage here is Warlock. So Warlock, again, they have a lot of really good tempo, you know, they have like Unstable Shadow Blast, Spawn of Deathwing, just a whole bunch of things. They still have Demonic Assault. They have a fair amount of Discover, but not as much as a lot of other classes. But ultimately, their card quality just, again, isn't quite at the level of the other class. A lot of the class cards are essentially just vanilla drops and stuff, and they have some synergies that are a little bit too difficult to pull off. And also, Warlock in general just tends to suffer when the card quality gets so high like this, because essentially no one will run out of cards, and Warlock's supposed to have the life tap advantage, and that's just negated when everyone just has infinite things to do anyway. And in fact, it might even be worse because people want to go face to end games, and life tap hurts you. So life tap becomes essentially completely useless. But Warlock has enough good cards that they are still playable here. But with that, the one class which I would say is not really too playable, they still kind of are. I think people might be playing it a little bit bad, but you know, the last class we have on this list here is Demon Hunters. So Demon Hunters suffering from the fact that they simply have a whole bunch of combo-y constructed cards, really synergy based, that simply don't work in Arena. There's a significant gap in the win rates currently available between Demon Hunter and everyone else. Possibly because people are getting baited by those synergies, and especially again because there's so many more cards in Arena than normal. You really need to not be drafting really hard for synergies. It's just not likely anything like the Relic package, for example. It's just not going to work. Because on paper, Demon Hunter still, you know, they still have a good tempo hero power. They still have really good tempo cards. They have some ways to generate things. They have weapons to go face, right? They have tools. It's just that, you know, all their stuff is just diluted. But overall, I'm not convinced that Demon Hunter is as bad as the stats currently indicate. But right now, the stats say absolutely stay away. And, you know, everything else is playable. So I would still recommend just staying away from Demon Hunter for the time being until some balance adjustment is made. But with that, that is it for this tier list. Hope you guys enjoy. Let me know in the comment sections what you guys think here. Definitely drop a like, subscribe, and all of those things. If you enjoyed this stuff, I should be going live on Twitch probably right around when I upload this video, so be on the lookout for that as well. I should have pretty good a long stream there. Probably be doing another YouTube stream at some point in the relatively near future as well. But with that, if you're playing into the arena, definitely be prepared for just an absolute craziness if you haven't played yet. And if you are playing, hope you've had good runs. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. So with that, goodbye. Good luck in your runs. We'll see you in the next one.